Before slicing through enemies on the blood-soaked battlefields of feudal Japan, samurai did not carb-load on energy bars or sip electrolyte drinks. They popped marble-sized energy pills, chewed fermented bricks of fish so hard they had to be shaved with a carpenter's plane, and slammed sake straight from communal barrels just minutes before charging into a wall of spears. The food that fueled Japan's deadliest warriors was sometimes strange, sometimes brilliant, and sometimes so dark that historians still struggle to write about it without flinching. These are the 10 strangest foods that powered the men in lacquered armor through 500 years of war. Number 10 involves cannibalism inside a starving castle. Number 7 was created entirely by accident during a chaotic ambush. And number 1 might still be sitting quietly inside a Japanese pantry today. Buckle in, because the menu is about to get medieval. At number 10, we have hyorogan, the original energy pill, and arguably the most futuristic ration in pre-modern military history. Picture a small, dark sphere about the size of a marble, dense and slightly waxy. Inside that little ball, samurai cooks compressed glutinous rice, lotus seeds, Chinese yam, ginseng, cinnamon, adlay grain called Job's tears, and a dose of sugar. The mixture was ground into a fine powder, soaked in old, aged sake until it formed a sticky paste, then pressed into hard pills that could survive for months tucked inside a warrior's armor. Soldiers swallowed 3 of these pills a day to fight off the gnawing emptiness of starvation when supply lines were cut or rivers were too swollen to ford. The Imperial Japanese Ministry of War, looking back in a 1934 history, called them perhaps the greatest form of food the Japanese had ever developed. That is, military pharmaceutical science, roughly 500 years before the first energy gel was ever squeezed into the mouth of a marathon runner. Number 9 is hyorogan's lesser-known cousin, suikatsugan, the thirst pill. Battlefield dehydration was a quieter killer than steel, but it killed all the same. A samurai sweating buckets inside 30 pounds of iron, leather, and lacquered scales under the brutal summer sun could collapse before he ever reached the enemy line. To fight this invisible enemy, apothecaries compounded pills from pickled plum pulp, salt, and assorted herbs. The intense, eye-watering sourness of the plum triggered an immediate flood of saliva the moment one of these pills hit the tongue. That artificial wet mouth kept warriors functional through long marches across dusty plains and through dry mountain passes. They carried suikatsugan in tiny lacquered boxes tucked inside the armor, popping one whenever the leather cords on their helmets started to feel like sandpaper against the skin. Number 8 is umeboshi itself, the actual fruit, eaten whole and revered as the samurai's secret weapon against fatigue. Real umeboshi takes weeks to make. Green plums are sun-dried until they shrivel, then heavily salted and fermented in red shiso leaves until the color bleeds into the flesh. The result is a wrinkled, blood-red fruit so sour and salty that one bite will make a modern eater squint. Samurai ate them daily, often tucked inside a rice ball or chewed straight from a small ceramic jar. Modern science has caught up with the legend. A placebo-controlled study showed that the citric acid in umeboshi measurably reduced fatigue after physical exertion, partly by boosting gluconeogenesis, the process by which the body manufactures fresh glucose for tired muscles. In other words, samurai were eating natural performance enhancers half a millennium before sports science existed. At number 7, we have kachiguri, the victory chestnut. These were as much spell as snack. Chestnuts were peeled, pounded, and dried into a hard, sweet, dense cake that traveled beautifully inside a warrior's belt pouch. The name kachi sounds nearly identical to the Japanese word for win, and that linguistic coincidence turned the humble chestnut into a sacred pre-battle food. Before marching out the front gate of a castle, a samurai would solemnly eat his kachiguri to symbolically eat victory itself. It was equal parts portable carb bomb and good luck charm. The hard cake did not crumble in the heat. It did not spoil in the rain. and it gave a quick burst of sugar to a man whose hands needed to stay steady on the hilt. A samurai who refused his kachiguri was considered to be openly inviting defeat, and superstitious commanders sometimes punished him for it. Few foods in human history have been chewed with so much spiritual weight. Number 6 gets seriously weird. Katsuobushi is a brick of skipjack tuna that has been smoked over hardwood, sun-dried for weeks, and then deliberately inoculated with a beneficial mold that ferments out almost every drop of remaining moisture. The finished product is so hard, so dry, and so dense that it actually rings like wood when you knock on it. To use it in cooking today, chefs shave it with a special plane that looks like an upside-down carpenter's tool. Samurai of the Muromachi and Sengoku periods did not shave it. They tucked these dark brown bricks into their armor and chewed them raw on the march, gnawing off splinters of intensely savory fish to suppress hunger and load up on protein. The name was also a homonym for winning warrior, which made katsuobushi a lucky talisman as well as a meal. The exact same product is still made the same way today in fishing villages along the southern Japanese coast. At number 5 are the rice bombs, mochi, and yaki onigiri, the warhorses of samurai field rations. The famous daimyo Mori Motonari supplied his troops with little bags of mochi tied directly to their waist sashes, ensuring every man had carbs within arm's reach even mid-charge. Mochi is sticky pounded rice that does not crumble, does not easily mold, and packs an enormous slug of fast sugar into every bite. Commanders genuinely believed it sharpened fighting instincts in the moments right before contact. Then there were onigiri, the famous triangular rice balls, which were often grilled into yaki onigiri so a crispy, savory crust formed on the outside. This was the 17th century equivalent of a meal ready to eat, wrapped in salty pickled plum or sheets of dried seaweed for preservation, and to replace the salt that warriors poured out through every pore of their armored bodies. Simple, brilliant, and still beloved across Japan today. Number 4 is natto, those infamously stringy, slimy, screamingly fermented soybeans whose smell can clear a kitchen. Legend credits its accidental invention to samurai serving under Minamoto no Yoshie around the year 1086. The story says the warriors had been boiling vats of soybeans to feed their horses when an enemy ambush erupted out of the trees. In the chaos of the retreat, the men hastily shoveled the still warm beans into straw bags, slung them over the backs of their horses, and rode hard for days. When they finally cracked open the bags, the beans had transformed into a stringy, funky, ammonia-tinged mass. Starving, the warriors ate it anyway, and to their astonishment, they loved it. Natto became a battlefield staple for centuries afterward, prized for its long shelf life, its rich protein, and the strange energy it seemed to give the men who choked it down. Today, natto is still served at breakfast tables across Japan, born of a desperate retreat almost 1,000 years ago. At number 3 is miso, the soybean paste that quite literally won wars. Every Sengoku-era foot soldier carried miso, sometimes dried into hard pucks the size of hockey balls, sometimes smeared onto large leaves for portable transport. When it was time to eat, a soldier broke off a chunk, mixed it with hot water in a bowl or a helmet, and within seconds had a steaming cup of high-protein, electrolyte-loaded soup. Sengoku armies allotted roughly 36 cubic centimeters of miso per man per day, a quantity carefully calculated to balance preservation, weight, and nutrition. Powerful daimyo like Date Masamune went so far as to build dedicated miso factories purely to fuel their armies, churning out tons of the salty paste behind castle walls, while their warriors marched on the front lines. Many historians consider this the very first true logistics supply chain in Japanese military history, a quiet revolution hidden inside a humble brown paste. Number 2 is Jinchu Shu, battlefield sake. an entire genre of rice wine brewed specifically for the moment before bloodshed. Sake was sacred in Japan, but jinchushu was both sacred and tactical. In a ritual called kisho, samurai sipped from communal cups of jinchushu just before a battle, both to steady their nerves and to bond their unit into a single fighting organism. Illustrations from the 16th century clearly show warriors gathered around enormous lacquered barrels, swigging the warm rice wine for liquid courage as banners snapped overhead. Officers shared cups like a sacred oath, sealing brotherhood with every swallow. Some warriors carried a darker belief still that dying with sake on the lips guaranteed safe passage to the next world. The smell of fresh sake on a battlefield was therefore not a sign of indiscipline, but of impending, well-prepared violence. And finally, at number 1, we descend into something that history has never quite recovered from. The grimmest food in our countdown is each other. In 1581, the brilliant warlord Toyotomi Hideyoshi laid siege to Tottori Castle, and rather than smashing through the gates, he simply cut every single supply line and waited. The defenders inside burned through their stored rice in a matter of weeks. They butchered every horse inside the walls. They boiled the grass between the stones. They stripped bark from the trees and chewed the leather straps off their own armor. According to contemporary accounts written by men who walked away alive, when even the leather was gone, the desperate defenders began cutting flesh from the bodies of the dying. After more than 200 days of this, the survivors finally surrendered. Many of them then died anyway from being fed too quickly, in what medical historians now call the first recorded case of refeeding syndrome in Japan. Scholars use the period term hyorogan, the starvation siege, to describe what Hideyoshi did to Tottori, and the horror of it has never quite faded. Samurai were not just sword artists. They were logistics geniuses, pharmacologists, and ritualists, fueled by energy pills, fermented bricks of fish, victory chestnuts, mountains of miso, and the occasional shared cup of liquid courage tipped back beneath a war banner. Their menu reads like the strangest pharmacy on earth, but every item on it kept men alive long enough to swing a blade one more time. So the next time you peel back the wrapper on a protein bar before a workout, remember that a Sengoku warrior would have laughed in your face over his bowl of pickled plums and his battlefield sake. Drop a comment below and tell me which of these 10 foods you would actually eat before walking into the fight of your life. And if you made it through the horror of number 1 without flinching, you might just have the stomach of a samurai yourself.